Next up in my winter or Christmas candle ring project, we're going to be making the little berry stems. All finished, the little berry stem will look like this. I'm going to be using some 8mm round druk beads in an opaque red. I will have some little size 15 round seed beads right there at the end and the bottom of each berry. I'm using a size 15. You can use an 11 if you want. Your beads will just you'll have a bigger little knot there at the top of your berries. And this is a transparent medium brown color. It's also a Japanese brand. Check size 15 beads are a little bit smaller, I believe. We're going to need some 26 gauge brown copper core wire. And then of course your wire cutters and a ruler. Now to make the berry bunches, we're going to be using a combination of a wire back fringe and a twisted fringe. And we're going to be making one of these berry bunches. We need 3 of these little bunches to make a complete stem. So I'm going to be making the 3rd for a stem and then showing you how to put it together. Now we need to cut wire off of the spool. So I've got my 26 gauge brown wire. I'm going to straighten my wire out as I remove it from the spool. And I'm going to cut about 18 inches of wire off of the spool. Make sure that's nice and straight. It always makes fringes a little bit easier if your wire is straight. Now for one berry fringe, we need 1 size 15 seed bead, 1 8mm bead, and then another size 15 seed bead. When you've strung for one fringe, it'll look like that. A seed bead on either side of the round druk bead. And we're going to position these beads so that they're about 5 inches away from the start of our wire. So pinch and hold that in place. I'm going to take the long end of my wire, make sure it's nice and straight. Makes it more easy to control what you're doing. And I'm going to kind of loop my wire back toward my work so I have a nice smooth path while I'm doing my wire back fringes. I'm going to move this size 15 bead up and out of the way, and I'm going to take my working wire back down through this size 8 bead. We're not going to go back up, so we're going to go down towards the tail wire, not back up. So this way. Whoop. Get that bead out of the way. Just through the 8 bead. We're also going to miss the size 15 bead on the other side. So we're just going through that 8mm bead. And I'm going to pull my working wire through. I'm going to keep an eye on this little loop as it's going through, and if it starts to twist or turn into a kink, I'm going to stop immediately and fix it. So I'm just going to keep an eye on it while I'm pulling it through. And that's going to pull that size 15 bead right there at the top of my berry. And then I'm going to move this other one right up below the berry bead. And then I'm going to twist these wires down about 3/4 of an inch below the berry. So I'm just going to grab and hold about 3/4 inch below and then twist. And I kind of just use my little fingernail to make sure that that little size 15 bead stays up there. And I'm going to keep twisting until I've got these nice tight twists here. All right, so it should look like that. You'll have somewhere around 3/4 of an inch of twisted wire stem below the berry. Okay, again, I'm going to straighten out my wire, my long working end, and I'm going to string beads for my next berry fringe. I need 1 size 15 bead, 1 8mm round, and then 1 seed bead. All right, I'm going to pull those, let those fall down so that they're somewhere around 3/4 of an inch away from the bottom of the previous fringe. And I'm going to try and hold those in place. It's okay if it's a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. I'm actually going to intentionally try to make this a little bit shorter. So I'm going to pinch and hold that in place. And I'm going to move that size 15 bead out of the way. And again, I'm going to take my wire back down just through this size 8 bead. I'm going to miss again. I probably need to move that little tiny seed bead out of the way, out of the bottom there to get through the hole. Okay, so just through that 8mm bead. You can adjust the height, pinch and hold it in place, and then again I'm going to pull my working wire through. Now it's starting to not be a very smooth loop, so I'm just going to take a second, smooth out my loop, because we don't want any kinks to form in our wire. Okay, so again I'm going to twist these 2 wires here below my beads. I'm going to make sure that little size 15 beads kind of stays up right below that size 8 or 8mm bead. This kind of acts as a stopper on the bottom, and this acts as a stopper on the top to help hold that bead in place. So I just use my fingernail. I'm making sure that my wires are parallel to each other and nice and straight, so I get a nice smooth twist. If one wire is at a different angle, it starts to look like one wire is coiling around the other one rather than twisting together. Okay, so I've got my first 2 little fringes there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist these 2 wires just a couple times below, just to move down a little bit and to single out that wire there at the bottom. So we're going to then string more beads for the next fringe, the same pattern as before. And move those down so that it's somewhere around 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, 1 inch, somewhere around there, between that previous fringe or this main stem here and the bottom of the bead. Okay, so I'm going to hold that in place, and then again I'm going to do my little wire back fringe on top. So I'm going to move this size 15 bead out of the way and take my working wire back down through just that size 8 bead. I'm going to try and make these 2 different lengths of my fringes. I don't want them all exactly the same length. It'll look a little bit more natural if your berries have different length stems on them. So I'm going to take this wire back down. Watch this loop the whole way time I'm pulling it through to make sure it's not going to start to form a kink. And then twist the 2 wires below the berry bead all the way down, making sure that that size 15 bead is caught right below the 8mm bead. Now after I add that fringe, I need to make sure I twist down all the way. Now you can use pliers to help you twist your fringes if you need to. I just use my fingers because that's a little bit easier and faster for me to work with, but if you need to use tools, you just go right ahead. After that, after I add a fringe, I'm going to twist these two tail wires together again just a few times to get me ready for my next fringe. So I'm going to add beads for 1 more and decide on the length of my fringe, about right there-ish. And then I'm going to move that size 15 bead out of the way and take my working wire back down through just the 8mm bead. Make sure you've got a nice straight loop going through, and then twist the wires below. I'm going to twist down again. I have 1 more fringe I'm going to do, so I'm going to twist down again just a couple more times. And I'm going to string beads for my last fringe. Okay, take my working wire back down through just the 8mm bead. Pull it all the way through. And then make sure my wires are parallel and straight beside each other, and then twist down. Make sure my twists go all the way down to meet right there in the center. All right, so that's the last fringe, and now I'm just going to twist these 2 tail wires together down somewhere around 1/2 inch or so. Twisting here just gives us something for the assembly wire to grab and hold on to, so your components are less likely to slip out during assembly. All right, so there is 1 finished berry bunch. You need to make 3 of these for each stem. So if you're making the candle ring, you'll end up with 6 stems like this. So you need to make 18 total of these little berry bunches. If you are making just a single pick, you're going to make just 3 of these because you're only going to have 1 little berry stem. All right, now let's assemble our berry stems. Now we should have 3 berry bunches for 1 stem. We're going to measure and cut somewhere around 2 or 3 feet of this 26 gauge wire off of the spool. Now I'm using wire to assemble, one because it's going to add a little bit of extra strength and I don't have to floss. So I do floss with the little white cedar leaves that we're going to see in the next video. So if you want to assemble these on an 18 gauge stem wire using floss instead of this wire method, you can go ahead and do that. I'm just doing this for these. Okay, I'm going to straighten out the wire that I just cut off the spool. And I'm going to take one of these little berry bunches, leave a little tail of your assembly wire kind of flat against the stem wire of the berry bunch, and you'll want to make it fairly long there so that they're almost the same length as the tail wires from the berry bunch. It's going to add a little bit more support there. Now I'm kind of pinching right here below this last fringe, the last berry fringe, and I'm going to start winding this 26 gauge wire right around the stem. And as I'm winding, I want to make sure that each wrap is directly beside the previous wrap, so it kind of looks like a coil. Let's see if I can get it a little bit closer. Alright, so I'm kind of coiling right around that stem. I want my coils nice and tight and close together, so I cover the stem completely. And I'm just going to keep coiling down about 1/2 inch-ish length. Now another way you can coil is to kind of just hold it in one hand, and then you'll use your thumb kind of to brace against the stem. You don't want to push too hard, it's just a bracing. It's just going to help you keep tension, and then you can spin it. And you want to keep your wire level so that the little coils are right beside each other. So whichever way you got to do, make sure that your coil is nice and tight around the stem. And then we're going to go down to about 1/2 inch below the little berry, so somewhere around there. And then we're going to add in another little berry bunch. Okay, so again, I'm going to meet up the bottom of the last little berry fringe right with where I'm coiling. Right there, so I can start coiling right below the last little berry fringe, add it in, and just keep coiling down. Again, we're going to go down another 1/2 inch-ish or so. So about right there. And then I'm going to add in my 3rd berry bunch. So again, I'm going to line up the bottom of that last little berry fringe right with where I'm coiling, and then just continue the coil. Now I added the 2nd berry bunch on this side, so I'm going to add this one on this side just to make sure I've got kind of a nice looking little berry bunch here, little berry stem. Alright, keep coiling. I want to make sure that my coils are not overlapping each other, so you're continuously moving down. We're going to coil down a little bit further below this last berry bunch to make the little stem here. You should feel your component getting stronger as you wrap down. And you can do the same coiling method that I showed before if that's a little bit easier for you. Just kind of twirl the stem with one hand like that. Okay. And then when you're done, if you have any excess length, you'll cut that off. And I'm going to trim all of these little berry stems to a different lengths here. And then I'm going to cover, starting about right here with my floral tape. So I'm going to stretch the end of my floral tape, attach it to my stem, around itself on the other side, and then wrap down to the bottom of the stem. Alright, so there is 1 berry stem. You'll have 6 of these for the candle ring, and then just 1 if you're making a single pick.